The champagne flutes glittered under the soft ballroom lighting, and the string quartet played some vague classical tune meant to sound expensive. The air buzzed with the artificial excitement that came from forced smiles and canned applause. I stood at the threshold of the conference hall presentation folder, tucked tightly under my arm, watching as colleagues filed inside without so much as a glance in my direction. Just as I stepped forward, Renata Vale, our marketing director, appeared with her ever-icy smile and a clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Darianne," she said, her voice coated in that syrupy tone people use when pretending to be polite. "You can wait outside." The words sliced through the air like cold steel. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. I blinked, glancing at the name tags being handed out behind her. My name wasn't among them. I was told I was confirmed for the internal seating. I said quietly but clearly, "We're at capacity," Renata replied, barely meeting my eyes. "You understand, right?" I looked past her. The room was spacious, well under fire code limits. Every department was represented. I spotted all of operations at a table near the stage. There at the front sat Jordan Alden, proudly adjusting his tie, the intern, who had rebranded my logistics model and presented it as his own. The same intern who had been with us for less than 2 months. Jordan raised his glass in a toast I wasn't invited to. "You're not on the list," Renata said again, her smile sharpening. "It's for award nominees and their teams. We had to prioritize." I said nothing. Instead, I took a step back, set down my presentation folder on a side table, and opened my laptop. The Wi-Fi connected instantly. I hovered over the message I'd queued earlier that morning. Subject line, "Notification of transition," and pressed send. Then I looked Renata in the eye. "You might want to check your email." I walked away before she could respond. Behind me, the faint ding of incoming notifications began. 1 ping, then 2. Then a ripple of alerts spread across the ballroom like a virus. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. I didn't look back. By the time I stepped into the elevator, the CEO's name had already lit up on my phone. 3 years ago, I joined Navison as a senior operations analyst. I came in quietly, no flashy entrance, no LinkedIn post announcing my arrival. I had 2 master's degrees, an eidetic memory, and a deep obsession with systems that worked. Within 6 months, I'd rebuilt the fulfillment dashboard from the ground up, reducing manual errors by 42%. A year later, I designed a predictive inventory tool that cut waste across 3 regions. I never asked for credit. I believed naively that results spoke for themselves. Every quarter, the executive team sent out internal award bulletins. Team of the Month Top Innovator Impact Spotlight. My name never appeared. I wasn't surprised. Clive, my manager, was always the one giving the presentations. I was the one creating them. At first, I justified it. I told myself this was just how it worked. I thought maybe next time. Maybe when the board saw the year-end savings. Maybe when we landed that new shipping partner thanks to my optimization formula. But nothing changed. When I finally brought it up to HR, not angrily, just curiously, Eleni, the woman behind the desk, didn't even look up from her screen. "Did you build these tools during your standard hours?" she asked. "Well, yes. I mean, mostly. But then technically they belong to the company. Attribution is at the discretion of management. Even if someone else is presenting them as their own." She sighed as if I were interrupting something more important than the theft of 3 years' worth of intellectual property. "We can't mediate perception, Darianne. Focus on your performance metrics. That's what matters." It didn't. From that day on, I stopped contributing ideas in team meetings. I stopped sharing outlines before I was ready. I built versions of my systems on my personal computer on my own time. I began documenting everything: draft timestamps, file hashes, version histories, and when I noticed a new intern being invited to executive briefings I was excluded from, I started watching more carefully. That's when I saw the pattern forming and began preparing my own. 6 months ago, I finished what I thought would be the most impactful contribution of my career, a multi-phase forecasting model for client inventory cycles. It was the kind of solution that could revolutionize our logistics strategy, dynamic, scalable, and adaptable in real time. I'd spent weekends refining it, mapping edge cases, testing stress conditions. It wasn't just data, it was insight. I handed the polished framework to Clive with annotated slides and internal test results ready to present at the upcoming strategic planning session. He glanced over the cover page and said, "Great. Leadership has a full agenda, so I'll present the key points on your behalf." I hesitated. He added, "I'll credit your contribution." He didn't. At the meeting, he rushed through a shallow overview that touched none of the core logic. "Further evaluation needed," he said flatly. The initiative was shelved. 3 weeks later, during a product pipeline review, Jordan Alden, the intern, unveiled a new logistics optimization plan. It was my framework. The architecture, the logic flow, even the tiered rollout sequence. The only thing that had changed were the slide aesthetics and a buzzier name, Quantum Sync. The room buzzed. Executives nodded. Jordan smiled like a golden retriever, discovering fire. Clive sat next to him, hands folded, eyes sparkling. Not only had they stolen my work, they'd staged its reemergence in a more palatable package through someone younger, louder, and less threatening. That night I opened both versions side by side. Mine, precise, sober, clear. His rebranded and sanitized, but structurally identical. I stared at the overlap, not in shock, but in stillness. The next morning, I saw Jordan coming out of Clive's office. Their laughter stopped the second they saw me. I didn't say a word. I thought about storming into HR. I thought about forwarding the version history to the CTO. I thought about writing an email to the entire board. Instead, I opened a new folder on my home drive, titled it Quiet Vault, and saved every iteration of my original framework, complete with creation dates. Then I started listing names. I could have screamed. I could have posted screenshots. I could have exposed Clive and Jordan in a fiery email and watched the company scramble to contain the PR fallout. But I didn't want containment. I wanted collapse, clean, deliberate, inevitable. So I did what I do best. I started building. I called it Atlas Vault, a real-time SaaS logistics engine designed not only to outperform the company's existing infrastructure, but to expose how outdated their internal architecture had become. It could process route recalibrations 4 times faster, dynamically adjust inventory forecasts with real-time demand shocks, and run full error tracebacks in under 15 seconds. I worked in silence at night on my personal machines using no corporate Wi-Fi, no shared tools. Every update was version locked, every line of code annotated. I kept backups on encrypted drives, synced to physical logs in a storage unit under my name only. If anyone ever tried to challenge the origin story, they'd be buried in a wall of timestamps and hashes. But I knew code alone wouldn't be enough. Tools are meaningless without people who know how to wield them. So I reached out to Maribel Kess, the former product lead who built an automation prototype that mysteriously never got approved, until Clive demoed something strikingly similar 3 months later. She now ran freelance training seminars in obscurity, burned out and disengaged. Then I called Theo Langdon, once our highest-rated client strategist, quietly dismissed after a VP took credit for his retention strategy during an acquisition year. Theo had never been bitter, just disappointed, exhausted. When I told them what I was building, I didn't pitch a rebellion. I shared a blueprint of a company that operated without politics, where execution spoke louder than charm, where skill was currency. They both said yes. Over coffee and encrypted calls, we built a list, the quiet giants. People who'd carried weight behind the scenes, only to be erased by louder names in meetings they weren't invited to. We weren't planning a startup. We were drafting a rescue mission, one brain at a time. Maribel wasn't the only one with scars. Word of what we were doing traveled slowly on purpose. I didn't want a team. I wanted a trust circle. People who had seen the machinery of exploitation up close and walked away with the gears still grinding in their ears. Theo introduced me to Delia Reyes, a former compliance analyst who'd uncovered a billing discrepancy involving overcharges to state-level contracts. She reported it internally. Weeks later, her position was restructured. Her replacement, a junior with no legal background, had quietly removed the flagged reports from the system. Delia was precise, methodical, and absolutely done with illusions. When I showed her Atlas Vault's draft security framework built with embedded compliance flags, real-time audit trails, and zero room for interpretive discretion, she smiled for the first time in our entire conversation. She didn't need convincing. She needed a mission. We never met in groups larger than 3. Everything was encrypted meetings disguised as unrelated consulting chats. Our plan wasn't about press releases or rebellion. It was about momentum. If we moved together, if we launched simultaneously, the company wouldn't have time to respond. And more importantly, the clients wouldn't wait for explanations. We mapped everything: the internal structure key, client dependencies, operational bottlenecks. We even calculated the exact number of simultaneous departures needed to destabilize department-level continuity. 8. If we had 8, we didn't just leave, we shifted the weight. It still wasn't enough. I needed funding, real infrastructure, legal protection. That's when I reached out to Helena Grange, a venture capitalist known for backing underdog teams with bulletproof execution. We met in a quiet cafe near Union Square. I walked her through the core framework, the transition plan, the non-compete loopholes. She was quiet until the final slide. "This could work," she said, "but only if you bring real business with you. Can you promise 5 clients if I can't promise them?" I said I can make them ask the right questions. She leaned back, folded her arms, and nodded once. "Bring them. I'll bring the money." The countdown had started. I started with the ones I trusted most, not emotionally, but professionally. The people who'd stayed on calls late with me to fix routing bugs. The ones who escalated quietly when our tools failed their delivery windows. People who noticed things. I didn't pitch them anything. I asked questions. "How's response time lately? Still having to manually override inventory triggers? Any luck getting that dashboard update we discussed last year?" They told me what I already knew. Delays, friction, black box reporting, reports that no longer matched on-the-ground realities, promises made in sales decks that the current system couldn't keep. Then I showed them something small, not a platform, a glimpse. A real-time widget that updated shipment allocations in less than 5 seconds. A clean interface with client-side controls. No sales fluff, just what worked. One by one, they leaned in. "If you ever build this for real," one said. "Don't forget us," another added. "Let me know when I can beta test." I didn't ask for contracts. I asked for interest and documented every reply. Then I drafted provisional service agreements built to activate only upon formal launch, carefully reviewed by Delia and an external IP counsel. Nothing binding, nothing breach-worthy, but real. Patents were filed under an LLC I'd registered months prior, Peregrine Ops. Neutral, untraceable. The office was in a quiet industrial lot with convertible space and pre-wired servers. We painted the walls ourselves on a Saturday morning, laughing for the first time in a long time. No one said it out loud, but we all knew this was home now. Helena released the first round of funding once the provisional contracts crossed her legal team's desk. It wasn't massive, but it was enough. Enough to pay for the space, enough to lock in licenses, enough to move. The structure was solid. The people were ready. The product worked. But as I sat at my desk that night watching version 1.0 run its first stress test flawlessly, I kept circling back to the one thing I couldn't predict. The morning of the gala, I dressed deliberately. Slate gray jacket, navy dress, low heels. Clean, sharp, neutral, the kind of outfit that didn't scream for attention, but refused invisibility. I arrived 15 minutes before the program began, laptop in one hand, presentation folder in the other. Not because I planned to use either, but because optics mattered. The hotel ballroom doors were wide open. Colleagues mingled, glasses clinked, the stage was already lit. On the front screen, the rotating slideshow of honorees paused on Jordan's Name Innovation Award, Jordan Alden Quantum Sync Logistics Suite. A total farce. I made it 3 steps past the check-in table before Renata intercepted me again, just as she had during rehearsal. "I'm sorry, Darianne," she said with a perfectly practiced frown. "It's nominees only past this point." I nodded as if surprised. "Ah, of course." Then I stepped aside, opened my laptop, and connected to the network I'd embedded into the venue's guest Wi-Fi router the night before, a small touch of poetic elegance. I opened the draft I'd finalized at 2:43 a.m., double-checked the attached documents, and clicked send. Inside that email, I stood for a moment longer, watching the emails cascade out, then closed the laptop and slipped it into my bag. A notification pinged on someone's phone inside the ballroom, followed by another, then another. Voices began to shift. I could already hear it, the thin edge of panic threading through polite laughter. I didn't wait to see Jordan take the stage. I turned and walked calmly toward the elevator, hearing the ripple grow behind me. By the time the doors slid shut, the first call from the CEO was already lighting up my screen. The moment I stepped out of the building, my phone began buzzing in waves. First came the CEO, then Clive, then the automated call from HR requesting an urgent dialogue. I turned off the ringer and let it vibrate against my bag like a small, desperate animal. By the time I reached the parking garage, the notifications had taken on a different tone. Emails marked urgent from corporate comms, legal counsel, and someone in procurement I hadn't spoken to in over a year. They all wanted the same thing, a conversation, a reversal, a delay. Too late. 45 minutes and the clients began calling them, not for clarification, for release. My exit email had been clean, measured, and strategic. The client contracts I'd attached were non-binding until launch, but clear in intent. 5 major partners had confirmed their planned transition. 2 were already circulating the press release internally. Clive, according to Theo's contact, still inside, had turned on Jordan within minutes. Said he acted independently. Claimed he didn't know the framework had been stolen. It was laughable. Jordan wasn't a strategist. He could barely calculate a logistics ratio without ChatGPT. The legal team discovered the patents had been filed under Peregrine Ops months earlier. Timestamps, technical diagrams, citations, all flawless. Delia had made sure of that. An internal leak, someone I'd never spoken to directly, forwarded me a company Slack thread. Someone had asked, "Is Darianne's departure real?" The reply had been a screenshot of the press release, scheduled and verified. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. An email from a client I respected deeply. Subject appreciation. Message: thank you for building what we've actually needed. Also attached is internal documentation showing that your version was circulated internally, then buried. I thought you might want this. You deserve to own it. I stared at the attachment. It was an internal report. My original logic tree, my watermark, my revision dates, and a timestamp from 6 months ago. I downloaded the file and saved it in the vault. Then I locked my phone and headed to the car just as someone started shouting my name from across the lot. "Darianne, wait." His voice echoed between the concrete pillars just as I reached my car. I turned to see Vincent Harrow, the company's vice president of operations, jogging toward me, tie askew, breath ragged. He looked nothing like the polished figure who usually floated through boardrooms with detached authority. His blazer was unbuttoned. His phone buzzed endlessly in his hand. "We'll match any offer," he said, chest rising and falling. "Salary, equity, title, name your terms." I raised an eyebrow. "An hour ago, I wasn't worth a seat. Now I'm worth a division." He winced. "That was an oversight. You know how these things go." I folded my arms. "Do I?" He hesitated, then glanced around as if someone might be listening. Looked the board. They were aware of some of the dynamics. Clive, Jordan, the misattributed work. But they felt managing it quietly was safer than risking public friction. Safer, I repeated, for who he didn't answer. So that was it. The gaslighting hadn't been incompetence, it had been policy. A quiet, strategic siphoning of value from the people least likely to fight back. Not a flaw, a feature. Vincent ran a hand through his hair. The company can't survive this kind of disruption. What you're doing, it's not too late to come back. We'll make it right. I smiled, not kindly. You've already shown me exactly who you are. And you've taught me something I should have learned years ago. Value doesn't flow down here. It's extracted, and it's disposable. He stepped closer. Don't do this out of spite. You're better than that. This isn't about spite, I said. It's about clarity. Behind him, the elevator doors opened, and two junior staff stepped out, eyes wide, as they recognized both of us. He didn't even notice. You deserve what comes next, I said, voice low. He reached for my arm, but I stepped away, opened the car door, and slid in. The last thing I saw in the rearview mirror was Vincent standing alone, phone still buzzing, his reflection shrinking as I turned the corner and accelerated toward what we had already built. 3 months later, Atlas Vault wasn't a whisper, it was a ripple, then a wave. We had 19 clients on board, including 3 that once made up the backbone of my former company's quarterly reports. Series A closed at double our projected valuation. Helena's team expanded their stake, and for the first time, every member of our founding crew received equity, not just a salary. We worked in an open concept office built out of a refurbished freight hub with floor-to-ceiling whiteboards and no executive suites. Delia sat across from me, coffee in hand, troubleshooting onboarding protocols with 2 junior analysts we'd just hired. Maribel ran training without slides. Theo laughed more than he used to. Meanwhile, my former employer watched its grip loosen. Their stock had fallen 38%. Industry blogs dissected their loss of institutional expertise, though no one named names. Clive had resigned to pursue other ventures. Jordan, last I heard, was moved to a non-client-facing department. Vincent hadn't posted in weeks, until he arrived again, this time in person. He waited in the lobby, suit pressed folder in hand. My assistant asked if I wanted to cancel the rest of the day. I said no. I was curious. The offer was high. Higher than expected. Acquisition, full integration of Atlas Vault into their enterprise structure. Leadership roles on paper. A fresh start, he called it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at the number twice. I built this table, I said quietly, sliding the folder back across the desk. I'm not selling the seat. That week, I delivered the keynote at the National Supply Chain Summit. I stood under the spotlight in a room of faces that once dismissed me or never saw me at all. I began simply, they told me to wait outside, so I built the door. There was a pause, then stillness. Not applause yet, just the weight of it landing. And for the first time, I saw not fear or indifference staring back at me, but attention. Real, steady attention. I spoke for 20 minutes, not about revenge, but about architecture, how systems fail and how new ones rise, how we don't need permission to lead. And this time, they listened.